everyone. My name is Maureen McDowell, and I am the founder and executive director of Keep St. Pete Lit. We are a literary arts organization located in St. Petersburg, Florida, and this is episode 18 of Typewriter Talks. And with us today, we have the lovely Nicole Caron. Hello, Nicole.
Hi, Maureen. Thanks for having me.
Nicole and I are dear friends. She's on Keep St. Pete Lit's board. She is a fiction writer and essayist, and also the head of first year writing at Ringling College. Is that correct?
Coordinator of first year writing at Ringling.
She wrangles the young writers. So Nicole, tell us what you're working on right now.
Well, I'm in the middle of a trilogy about a fictional St. Pete family. I've been working on this for a number of years, and last year I had a professional leave from Ringling College, which is their version of a sabbatical. I had a semester off to work on the research for this. So the story of the Harper family takes place between 1888 and really present day. So the story just grew bigger and bigger as I conceived the idea. So I realized I really needed to devote 3 separate novels to this, hence the trilogy. So the first book in the series that I was doing the research for last year takes place between 1888, when the original Harper ancestor, Edward, arrives in St. Pete as it's newly founded. Mm-hmm. So he's one of the first people from the north to come down here and settle. So that's 1888. That book ends in 1920. The middle book takes place in 1975 and 1995. And then the third book in the series is the 4th generation of the family, and that's present day. And that picks up the story of the niece of the protagonist in the second novel in the series.
What inspired you? I mean, you love St. Pete, but what inspired you to take this, epic odyssey as a writer, and also to dive into this family unit?
It was, it's the story of the story is long, and I'll try to give the nutshell version, but I had been working on a detective story with the protagonist was the protagonist in the middle book in the series. It started out as something completely different. And I went to the Wellstone Center in Northern California 4 summers ago. Mm-hmm. I had a writer's residency there to work on that story. And while I was there with a couple of other authors, one of whom was Ethel Rowan, who's, as a side note, promotional blurb for Ethel. Her novel is wonderful. It's called The Weight of Him. Mm-hmm. So if anybody's looking for a wonderful novel to read Ethel Rowan's The Weight of Him. Anyway, she was there, and she came into the dining room at the center one day, and I had done all of these character sketches and big arrows and like a map of all of my characters and everything that they needed to do, how they interacted in the story, and had this all out on big hunks of paper on this massive dining room table. And she came along and she said, tell me about this. And she'd heard a little bit about it during that week. And I pointed to all of the things that were going on in all these characters. And she said, well, what about these 2 characters over here? How do they fit? And I said, they're crucial to the story. And she said, but they don't have any arrows pointing to any of the other characters. Mm. And that was a huge wake-up moment for me, because until I had actually drawn out a plan, a very visual plan of how all of these characters fit together, it took somebody else who had no knowledge of the story to come along and say, those 2 characters aren't really connected at all. And so I took that sheet of paper in the moment, bundled it up and threw it away, and then everybody else was left. And it was a burst of clarity. It was a moment of, oh my God, this is a totally different story, and I never saw it before. This isn't a detective story. This is a story about this multi-generational family and their struggles. And once I made that shift, then I could focus on that story. So I worked in earnest on the middle novel of that trilogy. But when I realized that the roots of their problems went so deep, I thought I need to give their backstory its own story, because there are so many threads going forward and backward in all directions across these novels that I needed a way to connect them and not write an 800-page novel. And I thought, why not do a trilogy?
Why not do a trilogy? So is the story what's leading you, or was it the characters? Because did you hear the characters' voices and their, or was it the plot? What's kind of leading you through this?
Yeah, it's never the plot for me. It's always the characters. And I really feel that, based upon my having read thousands of novels over the years, and I've also written several others that will forever remain in the drawer because they were the practice novels. But yeah, it's really, plot happens after you put a bunch of characters together in a story, and you let them do things, or they do things and they surprise me all the time. Yeah. So, and it's not that I don't have control over them. It's just that as I'm writing, and then the ideas really start firing. So a character, I'll be writing out a conversation and a character will say something and I'll think, oh, that's interesting. Well, then what happened? But then what happened that preceded that led to this? So I'm constantly working backwards and forwards as I'm writing. So I'll be writing a scene and I'll make a note on a separate sheet of paper. I write all my first drafts by hand. So I'll make a note on a separate sheet of paper about, pick this up earlier in the story and make sure that it appears so that it doesn't come out of left field. Mm-hmm. And, as a reader of novels, you want to be surprised. You want to be pleasantly surprised by the things that happen. But as readers, we have to be able to have that, of course that would happen, because it's set up earlier in the story. If you can't just throw a bunch of things on the page and surprise the reader and have the reader say, I wasn't prepared for that. You didn't set that up. So the setup is everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love the way that you talk about how you're kind of, it's like magic. I mean, you're doing the hard work, but it's also like, I love how you say your character said something instead of saying, I wrote the character saying this. It's like you're actually getting to know these people as you're writing the story. Mm-hmm. And and it's like as a reader, like I'll finish a book and I remember the book's getting ready to end and I'm like, I don't want to leave these characters. I don't want this to end because I'm a part of it. And it's kind of like that as a writer. I mean, I'm a poet, so I don't really understand, but I've talked to enough writers and I love that. It's you're along for the ride too. Mm-hmm. And, and if you weren't sitting down, that's what people don't realize, I think, or first time writers, if you weren't sitting down to do it, these characters would never have voices.
Right.
They would never come to the page.
Yeah. And it's, you said if you weren't sitting down, and I thought of that very literally, to go back to that summer at Wellstone, after I had that realization moment of, oh, this story is so much bigger and it's something completely different. I couldn't sit down. I spent the rest of that day in the backyard, walking, just kind of pacing back and forth, walking in circles, talking out loud, because it was one place I could go where nobody could hear me. But I would just walk around saying, what if, what if this character has this happen to them back in 1905? What if the grandfather dies in this fashion? What if developers come in and circle like sharks around the family property? What if there is a big freeze and it coincides historically? It's historical fiction, so I really have to go for authentic details. So it's a lot of what ifs. But those are the fun things, is to imagine, put the characters in the craziest situations possible and then dial it back a little bit.
Well, and we're talking about Florida too, as somebody that's, descended from family of carnies in the carnival, anything's possible.
That's right.
You got to fit it into that narrative frame that fits with Florida, but this state is ripe for wild adventures and, all kinds of things. So I'm excited to read it. I mean, I can't wait to finish it, please. For me.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
What does a typical day look like for you as a writer? Because you're also a teacher.
Right. So, well, we just bought this house recently. So before house home improvement projects and before the pandemic, a typical day would really vary because I rarely wrote on school days because school days really have to be about school.
Yeah.
So if I've got something like that in my mind, I can't focus on writing. So when we were going to campus, my school days were just school days, but my at-home days, I guarded pretty religiously. So I try to write first thing in the morning because I'm freshest. I wake up really early often and can't get back to sleep. So sometimes I'll just get up and grab a cup of coffee and get right to work. But as I said, my first drafts are all by hand. So on the mornings that I'm writing, I've got the coffee. I'll light a little diffuser of lemon oil or orange oil because the fictional family, they own a big orange grove.
I love that.
Which was, of course, St. Pete was orange groves not so long ago. So I want that scent around me while I'm writing. I shut the door. I put a little sign on the door that says "Writer at work, do not disturb." and I pop in my earbuds and I listen to some instrumental music that's sort of meditative. And I go there. I go there I can write by hand without stopping for about 90 minutes.
Yeah, me too.
And in a 90-minute period, I can write usually about 3,500 words. And they're not always great words, but I can save most of them. So a good day is to get about 3,000 words.
It's interesting that you say you write by hand. You're actually the first person fiction writer that I know of that says that they write by hand, because I write by hand. It has to be a V7 point pen because it's the perfect amount in black ink. Is that what you write with? I'm curious.
I write with, well, I'm going to move my camera a little bit so you can see the setup here.
This is definitely writing nerdiness right here.
If you can see all these pencils lined up. So these are, I'll hold this up so see if people can see it. This is a Blackwing Palomino. It's a 602 pencil. So these pencils have been around forever and they've recently made a comeback. And they've got a beautiful, smooth lead. They make writing by hand a dream. So I sharpen 27 pencils and I lay them out in a certain configuration. I'm a Virgo. I've got all these little organizational quirks and these little rituals. This is part of the ritual of getting set up. So I sharpen 27 pencils because 27 is my lucky number. And I'll write with a pencil until I feel like the lead is going, and I just toss it aside and I grab the next one. The writing session is finished either after 90 minutes when my hand is cramping and I can't go on, or I've gone through all 27 pencils.
Wow.
And then I just stop.
Interesting. I feel like I know more about you now. I feel like hell on earth is like running out of the ink in a pen and not having another one. So it's like toilet paper in my house. Like I always have to make sure I have extra pens around and stashed in different places. Cause like if I get that, but I type out my poems when I'm editing, but the writing process for me has to be by hand. Yeah. And occasionally I'll if I wake up in the middle of the night, I'll put it in the notes on my iPhone. And just that's good for like notes, but the actual like writing daily. So, but you're the first writer that's actually said, and I love that. I love your process because it's part of it, like the smell of the orange groves, and then this 27 pencils lined up. Oh, I love that's cool. I think that's cool.
It's all very tactile for me. It's not just a cerebral activity. To me, writing is very physical. It's walking around talking out loud, which I'll do that when I'm alone in the house. but, or, you know, out somewhere where nobody can hear me, the what ifs, and I'll use my iPhone to record some of those notes. But it's the pencils, it's the paper, it's a certain kind of paper. I have to have the landscape notepad so that I can write sideways. And I'm so particular about that. And I'm particular about my space. And I've got to have my creativity rock so I can hold on to it sometimes when I feel like I'm slowing down. And
I have one. Yeah.
all those quirky things.
I have I can't think of what the stone is, but it's a crystal that I hold in my left hand while I'm writing. And yeah, I get that. And I think that beginning writers try out what works for you, you know, like you're a seasoned writer. And so you've been at this for a while, so you know what works for you and you know your little rituals. And I have my little rituals. I have everything set and a little altar and a desk, and I've got and I got the robe on and the perfect and the thing and the stuff. And then I'm like in it. And then it's like, okay, everything's good, dive in. So I totally get that. So what are some of your major themes?
Family dynamics, family relationships, especially, you know, I had a rather fraught relationship with my father. So I try to work on that a lot in my fiction, is work out father-child relationships. I'm really interested in the theme of legacy. I think that's significant for a lot of people. It's what are we leaving behind of ourselves, of our lives, of our work? How do we want to be remembered? But also through our children, our descendants. You know, I don't have my own children, but I have a niece and a nephew, and my spouse has nieces and nephews. So it's, you know, how do we impact their lives in a way that they can carry a little bit of us forward, of our values, our principles combined with their own? How do I take from my parents and my grandparents? How do I put that into the world today? How do my characters do that? You know, how does that legacy to me is so, if that were my only theme, it would just be so rich. I can do a lot with this concept of legacy. And in my trilogy, my family are landowners in St. Pete. They own quite a bit of land. And in the middle novel that takes place in the 20th century, the family still owns quite a bit of commercial property. So there's a lot of the story is about, what do you do with that property? How do you develop property in a way that is good for the community and not negative for the community? I mean, right now in St. Pete, we live in a time when there's a lot of development, and some of it is really interesting and some of it is just not great.
Great. And it's
so
really
how do
in the like last 7 years that it's really been this big boom.
So how do we create a community that's rich and meaningful and engaging and sustainable and developed in a way to further those aims rather than just profit, right? So that's probably my biggest theme these days, is this idea of legacy.
Very timely for the series too. Yeah.
I'm tackling in the middle and the third novels, I'm also tackling the theme of race, because we have which is a very charged theme, and I'm nervous about it because I want to do this respectfully, and it's not, you know, whose story do I tell? I'm just being really cautious and mindful of that. But by the same token, I want to kind of shine the light on the racial injustices that have occurred in St. Pete over the years, because we have a violent, unsavory history that's, you know,
and we're still very segregated.
Yeah, we have a lot to atone for in this community. So I'm turning a light on that as well in those two books.
That's a lot. That's exciting.
It's a lot. It's exciting. It's a little nerve-wracking. It's slow going. I mean, those first drafts come quickly, but it's the reworking that takes, the revision is a slower process for me. So I think about it a lot. You know, I'm in a writer's group. I take all that to the writer's group, and They say, do this, do that, make the character more, give this character more description, give this character more dialogue, let us see more of the setting. Because that first draft is surface, it's quick, it's the bare bones.
Yeah. So what advice would you give your younger writer self?
Well, I would give any writer, my first piece of advice is read as much as you can. Read the things that you're interested in writing.
Yeah.
And read widely. Don't just read, read if you're a genre writer, read in your genre, but read outside your genres so that you have that that depth and breadth of knowledge, so that you're bringing a lot of the history of literature to your story. I guess my other piece of advice would be to get feedback from other people, but get feedback from people who are doing something similar. It's great to show your work to your family and your first set of friends, and they can be readers, but to get significant feedback, I think you really need to take it to other writers and to be open to that feedback. I'm always amazed at the number of people who are defensive about feedback. We want to get better as writers, right? You leave your defensiveness outside the door. You won't get better if you're defensive. You've got to be open to it.
Got to be open to it. Yeah. My manuscript's with a poet friend right now, actually downstairs. She lives below me, and I'm a little like, but I trust.
But it would be good. Yeah. See, if you trust her, then you'll know to listen to what she's saying.
And I also love her work as a poet, and she's a different type of poet than I am. So I'm curious to see what she brings in, and I think that's good. That's really good advice. But also find people that not necessarily are safe, meaning they won't push you out of your comfort zone, but they're safe. They're not going to like destroy you. I mean, I know there's people that have gone and had a critique and it just leveled them, and they didn't go back for a year. Like it was just like, so pick and be discerning. But I agree, it is good to get feedback and have a community that you trust. So on the topic of reading, what are you reading right now?
I am reading a nonfiction book called Ernesto, and it's about Ernest Hemingway's time in Cuba. So I have another one of my many rituals is that I read Hemingway in the summer. So I'll either reread a beloved novel, or I'll read something of his that I haven't yet read, and I'm running out of those things. And then nonfiction about his work. So I'll read criticism, or I'll read a biography, and and there are hundreds. So there's a lot to choose from.
Yeah.
So I'm reading that, and I just started Celeste Ng's first novel, Everything I Never Told You.
Yeah, A Little Fires Everywhere. It's funny, I actually like the TV show better. The book is kind of, sorry if she's watching this, which I know she isn't. It just, I felt that maybe it was the time that I read it. Like that's the thing about books. Sometimes you read it and it just doesn't resonate with you in the time that you're in. It just didn't resonate with me. And then when I saw the film, I was like, okay, I get this more.
And see, I really love the novel. I love the novel more than I thought the adaptation was good. I love Reese Witherspoon. I'll watch anything that she does. She's so phenomenal. And what a fan of reading. She and Oprah, they're just making sure that everybody keeps reading, and I love that. But I thought that in Little Fires Everywhere, I can't remember the character's name, but she was really different in the TV adaptation, different in a way that I didn't think that she was meant to be in the novel.
But Kerry Washington's character?
Kerry Washington's character.
I agree. She was a little too something in the adaptation that rubbed me the wrong way, which it didn't in the book. So
a novel that I read that I absolutely loved, and that I really loved the TV adaptation that Reese Witherspoon also did, was Leanne Moriarty's Big Little Lies.
Yeah.
That book was fantastic. I mean, I'll read anything that Leanne Moriarty has written, and I've read everything that she's written. And I just thought that Reese Witherspoon did such a fabulous job of taking that story and presenting it on screen.
Yeah.
It
She
was
really,
moving.
I was thinking about like her generation of actresses and how they're all like becoming entrepreneurs, and they're like creating their own narrative, where because the narrative in our wonderful patriarchal society of them aging out at 35 or maybe even 30, I love that like women now are kind of making their own narrative and making their own platform. And I think that, and speaking of legacy, I mean, it's the same kind of concept, and how inspiring that is to be at that age and seeing these women that I've grown up with harnessing their like, you know, multifaceted personalities, and they're not just like this one note size 2-0 person who, oh, you've aged out, you're gone. So that's pretty exciting. So who are some of your favorite authors? You mentioned
yeah, and you know, that's classical stuff, and I'm old school. I mean, you know that about me in a lot of ways. I'm very old school. So I read a lot of Hemingway, I read a lot of Fitzgerald, I read a lot of Steinbeck, Edith Wharton, Willa Cather, contemporary writers. Danzy Senna is a fantastic novelist. Her novel Caucasia, it came out 12-15 years ago, but it's really timely today. Her memoir, Where Did You Sleep Last Night, about her father, it was beautiful. She's got a newer novel out called New People. So, and I will follow her so that I can grab whatever she's just published and read it right away. Danzy Senna, Joan Didion. I'm a huge Joan Didion fan. I think she was a phenomenal storyteller, very lean, very spare prose. That's, you know, nobody can imitate that, and you shouldn't anyway. Isabel Allende is a beautiful writer. Toni Morrison is a beautiful writer. I knew you were going to ask me this. I should have had a little cheat sheet list, because when I do have a number of people I follow. Dennis Lehane is a great storyteller. Michael Kurita is great with mysteries. Our own Lisa Unger. You know, I haven't read everything that she's written, but you know, I've read a few of her novels, and if you like mysteries, those are really fun. So
all over the board.
I do. I read all around. I do read nonfiction, but not as much as I read fiction. I'm into novels. They're like my food, and I'm starving. And if I go a day or two without reading, I don't feel right. I feel crazy. I steal time to read. You know, I get up early in the morning to read. I read late at night. It'll be 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'll be like, my head's drooping, but I have to stay awake. I've got to read. And I've been reading since I was 5 years old. So, you know,
it's great about this time. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, at the end of my life, I hope I have a book in my hand.
Yeah.
In the last moments. Like, a book.
Oh, I'm going to steal that. How would you like to go? Fall my head into a book.
Yeah.
Maybe in the bathtub, because I do read in the bathtub. When I was really busy before Corona, that's when I would read. There'd be a stack on top of the toilet, and I would read as the tub was filling up. I'd sit on the edge of the tub, and the tub would fill up, and then I'd read the bathtub, which, you know, is a mortal sin. But I tell people that, like, you know, just try to read a chapter a night, and if that's too long, find a book with shorter chapters.
And see, I don't have to try to read. I want to, you know, I'll steal time from other things to read. It's that vital to me.
Yeah, that's what's been so great about this time. Like, I mean, I'm stacking up. Like, I'm reading like 5 books a month. I'm reading the biography of Marie Curie right now, because I'm working on a collaborative dance project with a friend, and my intuition's like, Marie Curie, something about it, because I just watched the movie Radioactive, and it's like, it's so inspiring. Like, 2 years before winning the Nobel Prize, they're like doing work in a shed that has no heat. You know, when they don't have really enough money to eat, and then they win the Nobel Prize, and it's like, man, if they can do this, you can do anything, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So not that you want to be a starving artist, but you know. So
you don't have to be.
You don't have to be, thankfully. Yeah, either of us. So what gets you unblocked? If you get stuck, where do you go for inspiration?
I don't really get stuck.
Look at you.
Well, no, and I'm not saying that to sound like a jerk, but I just don't. I'm fortunate, you know. The pipeline is always open. I'm never at a loss for ideas. So when this trilogy is finished, excuse me, I have several other things in the hopper that I'm thinking about already, and some things that I started a long time ago that I would like to get back to. So I keep copious notebooks. I've been keeping notebooks since I was 17. So that's 40 years worth of notebooks as of this September. They're all in boxes,
Mm-hmm.
and they are crammed full of ideas. I mean, granted, a lot of them are, you know, old ideas, but there are little nuggets in there. I write down things that I overhear people say. I get some really strange and interesting ideas from overheard conversations, and things that I see, the way people interact, moments, things that I read are just, it's all material. It's all fodder. It's all fueling that creative fire. So yeah, I feel very fortunate that way.
I would definitely describe you as a curious person. You're
very curious.
My favorite people to have conversations with, because it's like, ooh, where are we going? We're going down the rabbit hole. Oh, this is going to be fun. You know,
I'm interested in almost everything. There are definitely things that I just like, no, I'm not interested in that. But the things that I am interested in, I remain wide open to. So I read a lot of news magazines. I read a lot of pop culture stuff. I'm just, I follow a variety of people just so that I can stay in tune with what's happening out in the world. And that just, it's all fuel. It's all.
Yeah, I relate. I mean, I still check People magazine every day. It's my like guilty pleasure. I just want to keep up on like who's, I just want to know a little bit and what are they wearing, and yeah, now they're all in masks. So it's a little frustrating, but so one more question, and then we're going to have you read some of your work. What is your holy grail piece of writing advice?
Like if you do nothing but this one thing, do this one thing.
Or you could, it could have a trilogy. It could have like little branches off. It doesn't,
The holy grail of writing advice. I guess I would say find the system, find the process, find the things that work for you. Don't go ahead and it's fun to read about and listen to other people talk about their process. It's fascinating to me. But at the end of the day, we each have to find our own way of doing it. So you can get inspiration from other people, but until you test it over and over and over, you won't know what works for you. There's no one right way to do it. Yeah. You can write by hand. You can write on an old-fashioned typewriter. You can record everything via audio. You can use a keyboard. I mean, whatever works for you. You could, slice open your fingers and write in blood on a piece of brick. That would be really hard and time consuming, but if it works for you, do that.
If you're incarcerated or in jail. I've actually gone there. Like I would scrape with my fingernail on the wall. I have gone.
Again, at the end of the day, do the thing that will set you up for success.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's good. And that's why the Typewriter Talks are been so interesting, because everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to that's what I really wanted to do, this, get in the brains of writers so other writers can see you take what works for you and leave the rest, and everybody does it differently and everyone has a different process. And some
Absolutely.
people write in their bed, some people write at a desk, some people want to write at a coffee shop, some people write at night, some people only write on Sundays, figure out what the process is for you. So let's hear some of your work.
Okay. So this is from the middle novel, and the title of that novel is called Bravado. And we are in an early chapter. We are in chapter 2. And my protagonist, whose name is Brett Harper, has just come back to St. Pete from New York City. It's 1995. Her brother is running the family orange grove into the ground. They have a number of commercial properties. They're struggling. The developers are circling. Their mother, whose name is Aurora Harper, their mother has stage 3 breast cancer. This family is in big trouble when we get here. So this is in the middle of this chapter. Okay, and my character and her mother are walking outside, and they're going to walk down to the dock. Their home is on Big Bayou, and this home has been here since the 1890s, and they are looking out over Big Bayou. Okay, here we go. I squeezed her hands. Tell me what's happening. It's all ending, that's what's happening. The grove, the land, the house, me, we'll all be over soon. Mother looked out to the water. From the living room, we could see down the lawn to the bayou. The Harpers had been here on this spot since 1892. Before that were some of the early pioneers, and before that, Indians. You stop that, nothing's over. I always liked this view. She dropped one of my hands and pointed to the dock. Before you and Teddy were born, then when you were babies and finally sleeping after waking me 10 times in the night, Mother smiled at me, I'd go out there before dawn, put my feet in the water and watch the sunrise while I drank my coffee. I didn't know this. Gator didn't grab your toe, I teased. No more gators in Big Bayou. They were all hunted more than 50 years ago, she said, as though I had simply forgotten. You know, sometimes I just took off my clothes and had a little pre-dawn swim to the float and back. No, I was scandalized and delighted. Naked? Yes, ma'am, she said proudly. Oh, those were the days. Mother grew wistful. Then she perked up and said, Casey will be home soon. You'll get to meet your niece as a person after all these years. The last time I was here, Casey was barely 4 and her mother nowhere to be found. I still can't believe Teddy is a father. No word from Casey's mother at all? Mother's face darkened and she looked away. We don't talk about that around here. And Casey has never even met this woman? What, does she think her mother is dead? That's what we said. Mother's voice was strained. Like I said, not a discussion topic. Okay. We both fell silent, and to make myself busy, I picked up the teacup, but Mother said, oh, leave it. Letty will get that. Just be with me, honey. I set the cup down and stood. I have to stand for a few minutes. I was sitting on a plane for 3 hours. You ought to take those neck breakers off. They won't do you any good around here. I pulled off my Manolos and instantly felt better. I held out my hand. Can you get up? Manage a stroll down the dock? Maybe getting some fresh air will help. Oh, honey, I don't know. I'm so tired. Mother tried to lie back down on the pillows, but I wouldn't let her. Come on, try for me. I put my arm under Mother's painfully thin back and helped her to her feet. I could feel her ribs. She wavered a moment. I held on to her and we shuffled to the French doors and out onto the patio. We made our way across it and down the lawn. Mother's energy picked up and she walked a little faster and with more purpose. I noticed a newer furniture set next to the pool, which was the one thing around here that seemed clean and functioning. On good days, I come out and sit by the pool, get a little sun before it gets unbearable. Your brother taught Casey to maintain the pool as part of her chores after he canceled the service, Mother said. You'll need to keep on her about her chores. Me? Why me? I'm not going to be around to keep on her about her chores, I thought. I'm not going to be around much longer. Yes, you are. Mother shushed me. The lawn, the patio, even the dock all seemed so much smaller to me now. When I was growing up, it seemed like we had acres and acres. But looking at the property with a professional eye, it was only about an acre, still a big lot for a waterfront in a small city. I don't think the treatments are going well, but Teddy and Casey, even Letty, they all get on me about going to chemo. I suppose I'm doing it for them and for you. We paused at the step. I haven't been out here in a while. Mother tested the first dock board, then stepped up. The slats were weathered gray. Petey stained and sealed it and replaced rotting boards every year before summer, but it looked like he hadn't done them this year. Watch yourself. I guided her out to the end and we eased onto the bench. Mother took a few deep, measured breaths. The old swim float was much closer to our dock than it had been when I was a kid. The water sparkled in the sunlight. A couple of sailboats bobbed on moorings nearby. In the distance, I could see the channel through tropical shores and Coquina Key out to Tampa Bay. We had a little shade from the oak trees as the sun was behind us in the west, but the breeze was almost non-existent. The back of my blouse was already damp. Tell me about the changes, I said in my best diplomatic voice. Aurora sighed. Your brother let Petey go. What? He's been with us forever. We had to choose between paying him or paying Letty. Teddy felt I needed help in the house more. Well, then he should be picking up the slack. Y'all can't just let the house fall down. That y'all just slipped out. I hadn't been back here half an hour and I felt the old life pulling me. I had to resist. Next week, when the deal was final and the papers were signed, provided I liked what I saw, I was on that corporate jet right back to New York. We don't have a choice. Mother stared at the water, her face impassive, like it had seemed so often when I was a child. After Daddy died, I cringed. I had not come back for the funeral 3 years earlier, citing an important meeting with a foreign investor who was only in the States for 2 days. Teddy struggled with the Grove. Your grandfather's head for business, even in his 90s, sick as he was so sharp. Don't tell him I said this, but Teddy just doesn't have a head for numbers. When the Thunderdome was being built, he sold off the old auto repair building on 10th Street to keep the Grove afloat and keep the workers, as well as Petey and Letty. Then he got backed into another corner and sold the apartment building on 3rd Avenue. Mother stopped and took a deep breath. I felt sick listening to this list detailing my family's decline. I should have been here. What was I thinking? I patted her hand. Rest now. We could talk more later. Mother shook her head. Let me finish. Your grandfather kept telling him over the years, protect the land, protect the house, but the developers kept circling. It was like they knew when we were in trouble and they pounced, always ready to buy 10 acres here, 10 acres there, another building downtown. I cringed again. I had become what my family hated, a developer in the business of buying people's woes at fire sale prices. That's your job, I could hear Lillian, my executive coach, saying. You don't have to apologize for your job. A mullet leaped out of the water about 6 feet from us, and we stopped talking and watched the water swirl as a school raced by. I couldn't see what, if anything, chased them. Teddy and I used to catch mullet for Granddad's smoker. We also caught redfish in the bayou, sometimes a rare snook. Dinner was always there for the catching. I agreed to let him borrow against the house, then the Grove, to keep up with business costs, taxes, and keep us all. The orange distributors are going with the big growers up north in Indian River. Then we had the freeze last year, lost half the crop. Aurora's tone turned bitter. I took her hand. Daddy always knew what to do, she said. No matter the crisis, Daddy could solve the problem. I should have paid more attention when he was teaching Teddy. I should have asked more questions, listened. I should know what to do. What you should have done was back me up when I wanted to take charge and learn the business. The words were out before I could stop them. I had practiced that with Lillian in role-playing, but I wasn't supposed to be saying them in this context. I was aghast that the words actually left my mouth. I'm sorry, Mother yanked her hand out of mine. What I should have done. She stopped and closed her eyes. She shook her head. It doesn't matter now. You've gone off and made a whole new exciting life for yourself. You're doing well, and that's what counts. Children should always do a little better than their parents. So, I paused and braced myself. I wish you had called me when the trouble began. I knew I would be writing a few checks to get Harper Industries out of debt and back on track. Mother's cold blue eyes locked on mine. You can't fix this one, not unless you've got $4 million in your back pocket. Holy crap. My mouth dropped open. No, I most certainly did not have $4 million to spare. I could barely scrape together $1 million. I played with other people's money, not my own. That's what I thought. We both turned and looked out to the bay.
Woo! It's so juicy.
And then what happens?
I'm sitting here in like 1995. I graduated in 93. So I'm putting myself, and I've kayaked Big Bayou, and I grew up in a fisherman family. Like, I was totally placing myself. And
Oh, good.
I see the challenge of the sibling that doesn't know how to handle business and keeps digging a bigger and bigger hole, but he's the man and the woman and all. Oh, you have so many like, ooh, so exciting.
Good.
Thank you
Good.
so much, Nicole, for all your wisdom and sharing your writing and being awesome and being my friend.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thanks for being my pal.
Yeah.
I'll see you Thursday.
Yeah, we're gonna hang out Thursday. Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining episode 18, my goodness, of Typewriter Talks. We will be back next Tuesday. Please go to keepstpetelit.org. We have all kinds of events, book clubs, online classes, poetry open mics, all kinds of wonderful, juicy things to do as a writer. So thank you again, Nicole. And everyone, please read and write on.